Susan. Oh, I beat you. Forgot. Kevin Pitfall
Here, online.
online. All right. So we have a regular members here. Our quorum is established. Next item is approval of minutes of previous meetings. We'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes of March 22nd, 2022.
Is there a second? I'll second. Moved and seconded. Does anyone have any corrections? None? Okay. Well, if we have none, then we'll vote on approval of the minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried unanimously. No public hearings. Okay. Next item is public communications. Does anyone on the commission have any communications to report? Staff have any other than minutes, communications that we received by email?
Right, we did receive a number of emails, comments regarding data centers and short-term rentals. I noticed when I got back in tonight that there are more. I'll send those out to you tomorrow. I think you also see on here a letter from Attorney Sweeney. We'd like to
Yes.
address that under a report to staff.
Okay. All right.
The other letters for the short-term rental, with the
Yes.
same form.
Some,
I did get an email from Tom Brad. I'll forward it to you. It was about short-term rentals. I don't know if anyone else got it. People should send them to staff. We can send them to us. Would be the normal.
Do you have any other communications, Deb? Does anyone in the public wish to address the commission tonight? If not, you can raise your hand and you want to come forth, and I guess you have to be up here to speak close to the device. Oh, yeah, is that one hooked up?
that microphone will pick up.
Oh, all right.
I have a hearing issue. What did you say?
Yeah.
That's okay.
I have a statement to make.
Yeah, would you say your name and address for the record?
My name is Sydney F. Van Zandt of 3 Front Street, Noank, April 11, 2022. I am one of the founders of Groton Open Space Association in 1967 to save the Haley Farm. I do not represent GOSA here, as our organization has not enough information to make an informed decision. My main concern is water. I have here a copy of Save the Sound, and I have a whole packet that I will leave with you with all of these things in it. Save the Sound titled, "When It Rains, Pollution Pours." The average big box store occupies 11 acres, enough hard impervious surface to generate almost 300,000 gallons of storm water in a 1-inch rainfall. This project abuts Route 117 that is directly above and or next to the Groton Reservoir. Attached, I include a memorandum to Richard M. Stevens, General Manager, Water Division of Groton Utilities, from consultant Carl F. Asimovic, dated November 6, 2003, following the Great Brook Division, stating, over the last 20 years, we have seen the quality of water in the lower reservoir system change significantly. Page 2 and 3, he continued showing great concern. He said his statement still applied when I spoke to him a few years ago. I also include a letter to the Planning Commission of Groton on January 9, 2007, by Dr. James N. Kramer, former professor of marine sciences at Avery Point, Yukon. His comments began, I urge the commission to consider broad environmental and public health implications of a large development of this type in this area. They were about the Walmart Supercenter proposed development that would have sent all the runoff into Hempstead Brook, a short way north of the Groton Reservoir. He continued, common sense suggests that we would see the increase of these pollutants in water concentrations, but we don't. The reason is that biological uptake by plants is so efficient that it masks the detection of the buildup until the impact reaches a tipping point. We all should ask for a plan describing how they plan to reshape this project. This will require massive and disruptive regrading of ledges, ravines, and streams to level environmentally sensitive ridges and hilltops. I have a map which I will include in this packet to you, showing the height of the ridges of up to 100 and 200 feet that will be coming down. A massive stormwater management system will be required to prevent polluted runoff from entering the streams and wetlands on its way toward entering the reservoir, as well as on its way toward Mumford Cove and Long Island Sound. I am including a number of maps so that you can see the location projects, where it abuts the state's Candlewood Hill Wildlife Management Area, where all that runoff will flow onto the Flattened Downs Patterson parcel that abuts Route 117. I am also including the Clean Water Summary, the 1977 amendment to the Federal Water Pollution Control Act of 1972 to help manage non-point solution. What non-point source of pollution? This pollution that is rainwater or snow melt that picks up pollution as it travels over man-made surfaces. There has been no input from neighbors and businesses surrounding this project because there has been no public hearings with a full project description. None of them knew, no, there is any project planned in this area, particularly the manager of the Mystic Marriott, who I went and had a chat with. I urge you, before you make any decision about this project, that you yourself drive up Route 117, go under Route 95. On the right is the very large Mystic Marriott Hotel, where people go to eat and sleep. And on the left, you see the Groton Reservoir, very close to the road. Continue for a mile or so, turn around and come back, reviewing the 200-foot plus hillside that will be removed, and then catch a look at the reservoir. An environmental impact study is needed here. The state has statutory right to appeal as an abutter. This project needs to be totally turned down. And I should add that I didn't give a call up to the planning department to get information of when it was we sent pipes over to the other side of the Thames River to add water to, can't remember whether it was Waterford or New London, and then it was going up to the casino or up that way. So it isn't just Groton that drinks that water, but the other side of the hill. And so I will be handing you a packet of all sorts of maps. All of them I'm intimate with, and I hope that you can then make some decisions about what should not happen in that area.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address this? Go ahead.
Mike Boucher, 16 Hillside Avenue, Groton. Hi Deb, thanks for your help. I had asked Deborah Jones about the decision that data centers are telecommunication facilities. And she referred me to a letter from Peter, and I won't even try to pronounce the last name. Maybe somebody can help me out, begins with a Z. Of English. He wrote, and I'm not reading the whole letter, but he wrote, "Dear Mr. Quinn, I've reviewed the conceptual plans of your data center campus layout for 2 areas of land that are zoned IM. Data center is not listed in the table of permitted uses in the town of Groton zoning regulations. I am the town zoning officer official, and I have determined that data centers would be considered a telecommunications facility. So I sent an email to Peter asking if I could see the conceptual plans of the data center that were referenced in the March 8, 2021 letter. Peter replied, there were no plans submitted for determination. It was a definition question asking if data centers could be considered telecommunication facilities. And with the wording of our regulations, it would comply. I did tell the planning department that they should investigate changing the regulations if this is something they wanted to regulate further. So I wanted to follow up on this because I was quite surprised that there were no conceptual plans even given to our zoning staff. So next I asked John Ryder, just to follow up on the data centers and how they were determined to be telecommunication facilities. I want to follow up on this issue some more to see if the planning department ever investigated changing the regulations, or was a decision made that this issue was something the planning department didn't want to regulate further. He replied that the Planning and Zoning Commission wants to regulate data centers further, and they will soon begin working on regulations to that end. And I would encourage you to reach out to Deb Jones with specifics. My problem with this whole process is I watched your last meeting and I saw the pushback from the town attorney on the idea that this decision should be vacated by staff. For me, this seems to be nothing but total BS. I am not seeing anywhere where this decision is nothing more than one person's opinion based on very little information. Town staff should immediately vacate its position on data centers and let the Planning and Zoning Commission move forward on determining if data centers should even be allowed in Groton, and if so, under what regulations. P&Z should move forward as Wallingford has, despite the fact that they also have an agreement with GotSpace data centers. From the Wallingford Planning and Zoning meeting on April 7th of this year, the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously voted to reject a zoning regulation amendment this week that would have created a pathway for data centers to be constructed in the town under a very special permitting process. One important note of that meeting, and I think Bill Grant also reported it to you, was that more than one resident made the important comment that if data centers were built and the sound problem couldn't be solved, the data center would simply pay the fines and go on with their business. A current member of the town council who voted against data centers and worked at Northeast Utilities for 26 years and in the information technology business gave the example of Microsoft being fined $1 billion, and they simply paid it because their profit for that quarter was $50 billion. Other issues for these types of data centers that require a power plant on site, peak shaving, summertime power shortages, and emergency situations were mentioned as the need for these on-site power plants. But in January of this year, Groton Utilities reported from ISO New England, Director Gaudet gave an overview of an article that was included in the director's package that was sent to the commission. There is a need for another natural gas supply line in the East Coast, but New England states have not approved it. When there are multiple cold days, there is a need for more natural gas. If there were to be a cold period for an extended amount of time, there may not be enough electricity, and this would force rolling blackouts. Again, in addition to the summertime need for generators, we're now talking about wintertime problems also for generators. So generators are going to possibly be used quite a bit, something you should strongly consider when allowing data centers. Extremely large transmission lines are also going to affect neighboring properties. And because obviously, I think you've all realized that one of these hyper data centers uses much electricity as a small town. And lastly, these energy sucking beasts go against the town of Groton's own resolution on climate change. So there's a lot to consider. I'd be happy to help you with any website connections. I know Wallingford has done a lot of zoning and planning work and regulation work, and it's posted on the web. So that might give you a good start. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was going to speak about STRs. Should I just wait for other people to speak about that? That way you can package it.
No, if you can,
I'm not gonna take a lot of your time. I'm totally opposed to them. To me, they're nothing more than commercial operations in residential neighborhoods. And I don't even understand why they exist now. Thank you.
anyone else in opposed? Go ahead.
Good evening. My name's Paul Getz, resident of Groton, 29 Windrose Drive. My family's been coming to the Mystic Stonington area since the 1950s. My family, part of it settled here. We used to come visit cousins and we would rent a house because my older aunt inherited the family house. We found that house on New York Times in the classified listing. That classified listing today is simply online with an Airbnb or a VRBO. I don't operate an Airbnb or VRBO in the town of Groton. I do own a small business in Stonington that benefits greatly from the tourist traffic that comes into this town. I do have neighbors that operate Airbnbs. And in fact, last month, I had the first noise complaint that I've had to deal with. And so I called the owner. I spoke to him and he took care of it. Had it continued, I would have used the available remedies of the noise ordinance to call the police and shut it down. To me, in the balance of good here, to take away people's right to their property, to rent their property, some of whom use that to support their mortgage, just the way Mrs. Kelleher did when we rented her cottage back in the 70s, is a very strong remedy for something where existing laws and conditions are already in existence. The Airbnb is nothing more than an online classified ad operated not by commercial entities. That is a fiction. It's operated by citizens who own their homes and need some ways to make ends meet. I know many of these people. One's a single mother I know of who rents out a bedroom so she can meet the mortgage. So I think demonizing short-term rentals into some type of large commercial enterprise does not fit the actual situation here. I think we would do great economic harm to our town if we decided to limit those. I think before anything like that, we should be looking at the tourist census and see where are these people coming from? How many are staying in Airbnbs? Ones that are patronizing the restaurants, the shops, in our town and employing people. So those are my comments. Thank you very much. And also just, I want to offer my kudos on the water. I mean, this is an incredibly important issue.
Go ahead.
My name is Jeff Gordon. I live at 134 Edgecombe Street in Mystic. I'm going to read a letter. I think many of you have received it. I'm just going to read it publicly. Dear Groton Planning and Zoning Commission, we are among the dozens of short-term rental owners in the town of Groton who have recently organized to both support the continuation of short-term rentals and to address any concerns brought by other members of our community. We understand and sympathize with the concerns expressed by some in the town regarding the impact of this emerging facet of the sharing economy. We are your friends and your neighbors, and we have no interest in negatively impacting our neighborhoods. While we feel strongly that the services we provide, namely welcoming visitors, tourists, parents of college students, families, etc., into our homes and the greater Groton community, that this is of great value to the town and local economy overall, our primary goal here is to respond to the concerns of our neighbors with open dialogue and collaboration on a common sense approach to short-term rentals in Mystic and Groton. We believe the formation of this group will contribute to open communication and the free exchange of ideas for the mutual enrichment of our town. I did want to just add one thought that had occurred to me earlier today. It was not too long ago that in downtown Mystic, and I realize that this entity is focused on all of Groton, but much of the dust that's being kicked up around short-term rentals is focused on Mystic. And it was not too long ago that downtown Mystic had, many vacant storefronts. It wasn't clear which direction Mystic was going to go, frankly. But some very creative entrepreneurial folks opened up some really great restaurants. And then more restaurants opened, more restaurants after that opened. And if you're like me, every time a restaurant would open, I would think, how can we possibly support another restaurant? And I'm grateful that there are all these great restaurants in town that we all enjoy, that people from surrounding neighborhoods enjoy, and communities, and people come from all over. I have an Airbnb above the garage in the house that we live in, and there's guests there right now who are in town from Baltimore for the restaurants. But it occurred to me that I think it's probably worth stating that much of the success of the restaurants in town, that we can continue to open restaurant after restaurant, is because there's this group of people who are in the community that wouldn't be here otherwise if there wasn't a place for them to stay. They're eating 3 meals a day here, and they're supporting not only the restaurants, but the seaport and the aquarium and the stores and the shops. And all the things that we have for decades been begging people from all over the country to come to Mystic. They're here now, and they need a place to stay. And we provide them with, many of them families, because we can provide multiple bedrooms with a kitchen at an affordable rate. And we've done this for, I think, 4 years now, and we've never had an issue. Not once. We've never had, particularly a neighbor who would have an issue with us. We personally have never had an issue with any guest that's ever come. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Yes, Ken.
Give you a copy of my comments.
You can.
You're welcome. Hi, my name is John Davis. I live at 198 Shore Avenue. And yes, that is in the city, but I'm also probably even more so governed by the town, and that's why I'm here. I think the city needs a lot of help on this issue. And I put a lot of stock in the town of Groton government to study issues sensibly and try to make good decisions. In general, my point is, with all due respect to people, having these businesses and so on, is that they're not allowed. I've yet to find in the zoning regulations where they are allowed. For example, in the city, bed and breakfasts are allowed, and then they're addressed. Like, oh, bed and breakfast, they're okay, these are the rules. That doesn't exist for short-term rentals. I live across the street from 213 Shore Avenue. I know this might be a bit of an extreme example, but in fact, it's my neighbor. They advertise that they sleep up to 15 people. But that's really a boutique hotel. I wouldn't call it a motel. Some others are, but that's a boutique hotel. Their rate's about $1,500 a night. That's about $42,000. For my definition of short-term rental is anything less than 4 weeks. 4 weeks or more, 28 days or more is like more than a month. Anything less than that is just my personal definition of a short-term rental. A new business on Tyler Avenue, 151 Tyler Avenue, has had a sign up for 6 months, provided by a property management company. I called them. They are $1,200. It's that house on Tyler Avenue. It looks like the Frank Lloyd Wright house, in case you've seen it or remember it. Lovely. And their rate is $1,200 a night. I read some of the letters that came in from maybe people here, other people that aren't here. And just the thing I don't understand is why, with all that sincerity, the zoning regulations don't apply to those businesses, which are primarily in residential zones. Or put another way, why have planning and zoning regulations if they're selectively enforced or followed and other times not? I think we, this town, have been putting very precise measures to the concerns about this data center issue. But at other times, if somebody wants to open up a business, sort of a small short-term motel next door to other people who have been living there, that's okay. So that just jumbles my brain that it's the rules matter a lot sometimes, and other times we should facilitate people not following those rules, the zoning regulations. I just don't get it. Specific to, I'm sorry, I have a family friend. This is a good one. It just dawned on me the other day. I was delivering, I deliver for a food company. I was delivering to over there by, I don't know, the Oyster Club and other businesses in that area. So I was having a conversation with somebody related to, it's called the Port of Call. And I was insisting, oh, tell me about your room upstairs, your dining room upstairs, the one on the ground level, if you've seen it. It's absolutely lovely. So finally, so I was wrong. The second room, if you will, is downstairs. I guess you might call it the basement. But upstairs, I was advised by one of the managers, the business managers of kind of this whole commission, if you will. Oh no, that's Airbnb. So my point is, I have a family friend known for about 7 years who works in Groton long-term for the town, who got moved out of one of the, I think it was 3 or 4 apartments directly above Port of Call. They weren't told why. It was just like, oh, new owner, no lease. You know, I wasn't there for the particulars, but it turns out I just accidentally found out, in case you want to look into it. And probably that's not a residential district, but apartments were lost, meaning places for people to live in town who work here. That was pushed aside for somebody to, you know, maybe charge 500 or 800 a night or whatever they might go for. That's really sad. I thought you might like to hear that story. Specific to Mystic, which you probably heard before, is Mercator Associates of Ridgefield, also referred to as 92 High Street LLC, and many other names. All I will say is evidently they can't afford a website to kind of describe who they are, but they are increasing their holdings in Mystic. I think my personal count is it's about up to 6 or so. So this is a business that doesn't live here. I think all of their business ownerships are in residential districts or residential neighborhoods. So from a distance, they're taking away housing stock and converting it to income generating businesses. My understanding of our town zoning regs is just that's not allowed. So I don't see why it goes on. So just in summary, this is what I would suggest is whatever the right way is to do it, and I don't know, but put a moratorium on this kind of business. I guess I'm less concerned about it in a business district. That's kind of where businesses should be, if you will. You know, the Route 1s of America. But the issue of businesses operating in residential zones illegally, it should be stopped, not accommodated, stopped. Well, they close them all, just like, because it's not legal. And I'm waiting for somebody to show me the fine print that it is legal. So just stop it. And then all the parties come to the table. I don't think this should be an exercise or a gesture in compromise in the sense of, well, we've been, you know, we haven't been following the zoning rules for years. Why would we bother to look at it now and be of concern? Well, because I'll tell you, because the internet is jet fuel for this issue. That's what's happening. You know, the New York Times ads, if you will, that was sort of the good old days. Now we've gone into the jet age, and it's like the whole world. If I've got a motel next door to somebody that lives there and I want to rent it, now I've got the whole world and look at it and possibly rent it. So I would just suggest moratorium, bring the parties to the table. And you, if you're sort of the, let's say, starting authority group on this issue, you decide what you think is best for Groton. I would suggest sticking with businesses stay in business zones and residential districts or people who live there and become neighbors and part of the neighborhood. Thank you.
May I just point out to the board that you've got hands up online? I know you're just coming back to in person.
Got somebody, yes.
Good evening. My name is Arnaud Bourgeois. I live at 13 Gravel Street in Mystic. I'm the one who either listened to your zoning 10 days ago and got afraid with what the comments that the people were saying about short-term rental. And I'm a new resident with my wife, and we moved here a year ago. And we were lucky enough to be able to buy this beautiful home on Captain's Row. And we would have not been able to buy this house without having a short-term rental under the house. Some people will say, well, if you can't do it, just don't do it. That's true. At the same time, if I didn't buy that house where we live there full-time, very happily with our 2 dogs, our daughter moved in town also, there would have been somebody else that would have been bought that house. The house on the left, nobody's there all week long. The house on the right, nobody's there all week long. There would have been maybe another empty house on Captain's Row. Today, you have a happy family there. And I do need that income because it helps me pay the taxes. And I don't think the taxes are going to go down at any time. Let me know if I believe it is important for us to stay here, to work with the commission to face that new problem. It is not, the reason you don't have any rules on it is because it's a new problem. You and many other cities in America are facing what we're talking about tonight. And it is not it's not black and white. There is some gray there, and it's true. But we would love to be able to work with you to try to find the best solution for Mystic and Groton. Thank you.
Anyone else? I got a lot of people.
There, Tyler Hesper, 29 Route 27 in Old Mystic. I own and operate 2 short-term rentals unoccupied in the area. I also oversee 2 others for people who can't be around. Because I'm responsible, I've never had an issue with any of my neighbors. I've been doing this since 2019. A few months ago, I had a guest reach out and ask me if they could fit or if they could bring 5 cars. I had no issue whatsoever telling them that if you're going to bring 5 cars, this is not the house for you. I have clear instructions on my listings regarding rules, quiet hours. In the case where I have a shared driveway, I tell my guests to respect my neighbor's privacy. I want to express my concern and empathy for those of you who are living next door to these rentals and aren't happy. I want to be clear that I, along with the vast majority of us short-term owners, do not want irresponsible guests coming here, and we do not want irresponsible property owners buying up these properties from out of state and not having any rules or letting the guests do whatever they want to. For a long time, Mystic has been a beautiful, historic tourist attraction. I genuinely enjoy sharing our town as well as the updates that I've done to my homes with other people. A lot of us are local, hardworking individuals who have dedicated a lot of effort, time, and money into these properties. And because it's been allowed for so long, it's become a very reliable source of income for people. I'm a local realtor in the area. This town is way too small for me to jeopardize anything I do to ruin my reputation. So I take it very, very seriously, and I'm very responsible. Thank you.
Did you say your name again?
Tyler Hespelin. Thank you. Hespelin, not Respelin.
You got somebody in the doorway that wants to speak.
My name is Catherine Pratt, and I live at 75 Front Street. Chair Pritchard and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, good evening. I appreciate this opportunity to express my support for the suggested moratorium on applications for data centers, which will give the commission time to consider how this potential new use corresponds to the stated purposes of the Town of Groton zoning regulations to promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the community and to encourage the most appropriate use of land throughout the town. We have heard that a decision was made in March of 2021 by the Town of Groton Manager of Inspection Services, Peter Zavinglis, also known as the Town of Groton zoning official, that data centers are allowed uses under the town's zoning regulations because they are telecommunication facilities, which are permitted in industrial mixed-use zones. As the commission and the public study this disputed decision, it would be helpful to see the following items, which I hope will be obtained. 1, a copy of the conceptual plan for the data center campus layout for 2 areas of land that are zoned IM, as referred to by Mr. Zvinglis in his letter to Thomas Quinn of GotSpace Data LLC dated March 8th, 2021. A copy of this letter is attached to my email of today. 2, copies of any public notices of the decision of the Manager of Inspection Services that data centers are allowed uses for the 2 proposed areas of land referred to in the conceptual plan of GotSpace Data LLC mentioned above. 3, a general description of the specific sites within areas of IM zoned land, which the above referenced March 8th, 2021 determination of Mr. Zavinglis is applicable. 4, a copy of any documents other than the March 8th, 2021 letter written by Mr. Zavinglis that explain the factual and legal basis for his determination that data centers are allowed uses under the Town of Groton zoning regulations. And 5, a copy of any correspondence between or among town officials, Thomas Quinn, or any agents or representatives of Thomas Quinn that preceded the decision by the Manager of Inspection Services that data centers are allowed uses in IM zones. Thank you for your time and consideration.
The person standing on the doorway, you want to?
Mr. Chair, I just want to be aware that we do have folks online who are.
All right. If you're just, yeah, go ahead.
I'll be brief. Kristen Earls, 144 Brook Street in Groton. Good evening, Chairman Pritchard, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Again, my name is Kristen Earls, 144 Brook Street. This evening, I'm also speaking on behalf of Groton Conservation Advocates, as both co-chairs had to speak at other meetings on budget matters tonight and regret that they are unable to attend. As citizens who value our town's environmental, economic, and public health, we wish to express appreciation for the Commission's wisdom in proposing a temporary data center moratorium on any application or activity related to this use. With it, the Commission recognizes that data centers present complexities and impacts distinct from other light industrial uses, from air and noise pollution to vast energy consumption and potential runoff affecting water, wildlife, and local landscapes, and on a far greater scale. We applaud the Commission's judgment in taking the necessary time to develop an informed regulatory position on data centers in Groton, and we hope that the Commission will move as quickly as possible to enact this moratorium. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Ian Thomas, I'm 24 Jefferson Drive in Groton. I'm not going to reiterate what a number of other people have already said as far as data centers go. I do appreciate the moratorium that's being considered tonight. I would only encourage that maybe it be extended to 12 months to make sure you have plenty of time to do the due diligence as necessary. And as far as the environmental concerns, and especially with Catherine Pratt, her comments with the list of interesting documents and history as far as like what's occurred would be definitely valuable for the public record. I am most curious, based on the town attorney's description of the zoning official and the zoning enforcement officer's relationship to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm curious to know how they can act as an agent of this commission, yet not have frequent communication with this commission. I've watched a number of the meetings recently, and I sense some frustration and confusion, not to put words in your mouth, but I sense some confusion and frustration with how these things came to pass. And I concur with that. I share that. And I would suggest humbly that moving forward, that the zoning official and the zoning enforcement official become a regular part of this meeting. Every time this commission meets, they should be meeting with you and sharing whatever developing situations they are facing on the ground. I think that is of utmost importance to have full communication. If they're going to be acting as your agent, they should probably be checking in with you on a frequent basis. And yeah, I think overall, just the process has put off a lot of people like that. That's where a lot of frustration and confusion comes from, is that these things happen really fast and then suddenly they come to light. So I think moving forward, there's probably great value to be had to have like the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Economic Development Commission, the Conservation Commission, the Town Council, even the RTM could be involved in some sort of more collaborative effort looking at overall projects, especially ones that are substantial and maybe require some zoning changes or large tax abatements. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your diligence. And I look forward to seeing what develops next.
You have people online. Yeah, you want to just call them.
So George Davis. George Davis, you can unmute.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is George Davis, and I live at 7 Gravel Street, Unit 1 in Mystic. And I'm going to speak about short-term rentals. Now, to be clear and fair, I'm not talking about bed and breakfast with an owner on site. Okay. The last meeting I spoke at length, the last Planning and Zoning committee meeting, about my negative experience living next to a high volume short-term rental. Nothing has changed my mind since then, and the situation has only gotten worse. The owners of short-term rentals would have you believe that they are our friends and neighbors, and they are just enhancing our community by renting their property to tourists, and that this is of great value to the town and the local economy. They pretend that they are doing this for our good and that all of their guests are angels. I say bunk. This is just a fairy tale that they spin. Now, we are talking about commercial entities, limited liability corporations operating in residential neighborhoods to the detriment of the local residents. The disruption of the neighborhoods due to the sheer volume and congestion of people and cars, loud noises, rude and drunken behavior by guests, apparent pot smoking, barking dogs, wild parties, trash on the street is unacceptable. We have seen it all. The negative effect on our property values is one more kick in the pants. Most of the owners of these houses are neither our friends nor our neighbors. They don't even live in Groton. Don't be fooled. This is about butts and beds, occupancy rates, cleaning fees and such. This is only about money in their pockets. 1,000 people and 500 separate cars and trucks a year is not a mom and pop business. And that's just the one short-term rental that lives next door to me. We need to get ahead of this. Right now, no one knows how many short-term rentals there are or where they are. The gold rush to open more short-term rentals in the Mystic Historic District is on. Regulation is needed now. Hopefully, it's not already too late. No one wants to buy a house next to an Airbnb. I thank you for listening to me.
Yeah, just go down. Jeff.
Jeff Kerr?
Hi, this is Jeff Kerr from 6 Ashby Street in Mystic. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Listen, I don't want to repeat too much information that's already been said about short-term rentals, but just to kind of reiterate some of the points that were just made, previous speaker, I really think this comes down to there's commercial businesses operating in residential zones. I can't necessarily open up a gas station here on 6 Ashby Street without getting a significant number of permits and making sure that I'm in a commercial zone to do it. I don't see how operating a nightly hotel with turnover when the folks who are owning the property aren't even living there is really considered a owner occupied bed and breakfast. I think when most people buy a house in a residential neighborhood, they're expecting to either live in the house or potentially rent it out to like a long-term renter as an investor. But the bottom line is, even if they're planning on renting out the house, the onus shouldn't be on the person's neighbor that is a resident and a neighbor and somebody who's a full-time resident to make sure that their neighbor is adhering to the town's planning and zoning code and making sure they have the proper permits, right? The onus is on the homeowner. So if a property owner in ignorance violates a local code or zoning regulation, I don't see how just ignorance of the law just excuses violation of the law. As far as long-term effects, I know there's a lot of discussion here about from small business owners regarding the benefits they've seen from this kind of new business that's kind of this new kind of segment of folks that are coming in via Airbnbs and VRBOs. I totally understand that, but I'd ask you to take a look at Charleston, South Carolina, after Hurricane Hugo hit. After the hurricane hit, the town and the city made a pretty conscious decision to go to a tourist economy, thinking that it would just immediately boost the town's revenue streams. And it did initially, but over time, it drove up everybody's property values to the point where it was raising property taxes because everybody's buying a house based on a rental income model instead of just a single family home, right? So over time, you see people that are living on a fixed income that are already retired, right? That are seeing their property taxes go up precipitously, that are then forced to basically choose between cutting expenses elsewhere or leaving their lifelong home. And it caused over time the town to completely lose the feel that it once had that Mystic currently has. Listen, I understand the folks that are concerned that are operating small businesses here. The only thing I would invite you to remember is, when my wife first moved here back 15 years ago, downtown Mystic was pretty vibrant then, and I don't recall there being an option for an Airbnb or VRBO for every other house on a residential street back then. So I think we have a pretty robust economy here. I don't necessarily think we need to necessarily just completely shift our focus on the revenue streams on seasonal tourists that are here for half the year and expect that to prop up Mystic going forward and Groton going forward. Thank you all for your time, and appreciate you listening.
We got Bruce McDermott.
Good evening. My name is Bruce McDermott. I'm here with my wife, Carol. We're at 328 Noank Road, and I'd like to speak a little bit about short-term rentals. I think if you presented our zoning regulations to an 8th grade middle school class over there, I don't think that they would come away with any other kind of a problem as to what to do with short-term rentals. It's pretty explicit to me that those things are absolutely banned. And the problem is, I don't understand why our town staff is so timid about enforcing those regulations. And the zoning commission as well, I think, needs to take a stand on this. We have a house right next to us that was sold for $1.2 million recently. The house is certainly not worth $1.2 million. But the reason it went for that kind of a price was because the people who bought it intended to make it a short-term rental so that they could receive some profits right away. And their investment would pay off. We have certainly the biggest short-term rental situation across from us over at Harborview Landing. I can tell you that they are not quiet folks. And I've asked those people that own it, who are great folks, I know them, but they just do not want to control that situation. So if somebody lives in a house and they want to rent it out to help defray their taxes, which are considerable in our town, that's fine with us. That's perfectly okay. I can understand that. But short-term rentals, we don't really want them in our town. The problem is, I would like to address another aspect of this. The last time the zoning commission met, we were supposed to investigate whether there was any written comment by previous zoning enforcement officers as to how they justified or the rationale for not applying our own zoning regulations. So I'd like to ask if this has been done. The other thing is, with regard to zoning enforcement officers, I'd like to hear from our current zoning enforcement officer about how he feels this should go forward. I haven't heard anything from him. I assume that's Peter, but I don't know. It may be Tom Zanarini. So that's what I would like to hear. The other item of business I think that needs to be attended to, I understand that our attorney who's representing us, Mr. Cody, is investments in short-term rentals in Groton. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what was told to me, and I'd like to know if that's the case. If it is, he certainly should recuse himself. But that's something that can be taken care of for pretty easily. Thank you very much.
Okay, well said. Hip, hip, hooray.
Well, Getz,
Yeah.
Good evening. This is Will Getz. I live at 45 Pearl Street in Mystic. This house was built in 1853 by Daniel Hall as a mercantile, as a commercial business. Sorry, did you hear any of that? Let me start over. This is Will Getz at 45 Pearl Street in Mystic. The house was built in 1853 by Daniel Hall as a mercantile, which is a commercial business. The prior owner rented the studio downstairs, and we have converted it to an Airbnb. And we've rented it for we're going into our 4th year. We've brought more than 500 people into the town. So I would say that the vast majority of the spend for those people went to the town and to the restaurants and businesses in the town and not into our pockets. So if the commission is looking to move against short-term rentals and put a moratorium on them, there will be a significant impact on the downtown businesses. Not only the people who are involved in renting the properties. I would comment that in our neighborhood, a house was recently purchased for $1 million. And that's 3 years after it was purchased for $500,000. And it was purchased by a family that's going to live there. So it's nonsense to say that inflation in this real estate market is driven by Airbnb. It's driven by New York emptying out apartments and people working remotely in our town. So I would also like to know or comment that it seems to me that there's a long history of short-term rentals in this area. Groton Long Point, for example, continues to have extensive short-term rental activity. So just want to point those things out and not get into other areas that people have already talked about. But, you know, I feel like there's a bit of a witch hunt underway here. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, Chairman Pritchard and fellow commissioners. My name is Tom Bradham, and I live at 7 Gravel Street in Mystic. I first want to thank sincerely the commissioners for listening so attentively to the many residents who spoke to you last month concerning the burgeoning short-term rental crisis in the town of Groton. Each of you represent well what small town governance in New England is meant to be. Thank you. Next, I want to assure the commissioners that I will not be reading zoning regulations to you this evening. However, I do want to make some comments. At last month's meeting and noted in the meeting minutes, the commission requested that staff provide documentation as to whether or not the town zoning official has made an interpretive determination as to the inclusion of short-term rentals placement on the table of permitted uses in the zoning regulations. If so, to what use is a STR substantially similar? Where does this use reside in the table? In what zoning district is this use permitted? If a residential district, in what category of use? There are 3. Does it belong? Finding no such documentation and verification of this in tonight's agenda package, I can only assume that the zoning official has not made an official interpretive determination. In the absence of any official interpretive determination by the zoning official that short-term rentals, STRs, are, quote, substantially similar, end quote, to a listed use in the table of permitted uses, that use is prohibited by the current zoning regulations. Accordingly, given your zoning regulations, I request to make of the commissioners. Please comply with section 9.2-1.a of the current regulations that state, quote, these regulations shall, my emphasis, be enforced by the Planning and Zoning Commission acting by and through the zoning official, end quote. Please direct the town's zoning official to prohibit the use of all short-term rentals, that is transient lodging, in the town's RS and R residential zoning districts. Furthermore, direct the zoning official to use each and every enforcement mechanism articulated in Title 8, Section 124, Section 8-12 of the general statutes of the state of Connecticut to the fullest extent possible to protect our neighborhood quality of life in Groton. We need immediate action to save our neighborhoods. If at some time in the future the PZC wishes to adopt short-term rental regulations or work with the town council in the development of an effective ordinance, so be it. But a relief is needed now to save our quality of life for us, the residents of Groton. Frankly, folks, it is time to end this short-term rental debacle that has been exacerbated by the laissez-faire approach to enforcing zoning regulations by town staff. In closing, thank you, commissioners, for your volunteer service to your fellow residents. Good evening. Thank you.
Paula McDougall.
Here we go. Hello, I'm going to be quick because you have been all very patiently waiting and listening to everyone for an hour. My name is Paula McDougall. I live at 464 Flanders Road, and you have received a letter from me concerning the data center. I absolutely think enough information has come to light to warrant the discussion of whether data centers should be classified, quote, as light industrial. And who made that determination in the first place? Based on their size, their energy consumption, the noise pollution, the diesel pollution, they are truly a new phenomena that needs to be studied. And they are very different from any of light industrial things that we see in our area. For others, the letter is posted on the website, so you can take a look at it. I'd like to thank Bill Grant for watching the Wallingford meeting, and it seems that they had many of the same fears. A fear of mine that I've also expressed at town council meetings is that no matter how determined and how committed the developer is to deal with the noise factor, I truly wonder if there's anything that can be done with the noise factor. And that's exactly what the sound engineer said at the Wallingford meeting. So I am grateful for the moratorium, but I really urge you to, take a lot of these things into consideration and think about exactly what a data center, this new phenomena that we have entering into our lives, is it really light industrial? Thank you very much for your time.
Michelle Green.
Good evening. I'm Michelle McCullen Green. I live at 450 Flanders Road. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm sorry. I'll restate that because I'm Michelle McCullen Green. I live at 450 Flanders Road in Mystic. Good evening to you all. Thank you very much to the commission for quickly taking up discussion of a moratorium on data centers in Groton. I won't repeat my concerns I previously expressed to you in my March 22nd letter, but just know that they do still stand. I again also suggest or question if the zoning of the properties in question on Flanders Road should be revisited due to what has developed up around it since it was first zoned. And I also agree with previous commenter that if the town zoning official will be speaking for and making decisions for the Planning and Zoning Commission, it's very confusing to me as a resident why they are not present for your meetings and in regular communication with the commission. And then I'm hoping that if you do choose, I'm very grateful that you did move to discuss a moratorium, and I do hope it passes. But if the commission does strive to approve data centers in Groton, I hope that all of resident concerns are addressed, even though, again, I don't want to revisit what's already been said, but I hope that you include significant penalties in the regulations to be able to effectively enforce whatever regulations you do decide on, because as you know, these companies are extremely wealthy, and any minor financial penalty does not seem to be like it would be effective enough to keep them in check. And just finally, I'm really looking forward to seeing how your research progresses on how the commission can implement zoning regulations to protect the health and well-being of Groton neighborhoods from the data centers. And I do thank you for your time.
Last one, Cheryl Gamble.
Yes, hello. It's me, it's Cheryl Gamble and my husband Travis Gamble. Travis is going to be speaking mostly.
And we own 19 Gravel Street. We actually own it in an LLC, G Kovac Investments, one of my wife's LLCs. And we have no plan of ever renting that house. We are against short-term rentals. There's been a lot of wonderful comments said in favor of our argument. There's just a couple I would like to add. There's a couple comments that the economy of local Mystic with the restaurants would suffer without short-term rentals. I think restaurants suffer from poor food and poor service. And I think Mystic has plenty of people walking around downtown without short-term rentals to support wonderful restaurants. And we do have wonderful restaurants. And I think we just want to go on record that, we were against short-term rentals. And we want to preserve 19 Gravel Street in a historical manner that is beneficial to the town. Thank you.
So it looks like we're at the. Let's see that one more. I guess we're at the end of the list, so we can proceed. And just for information, before a change is made to the zoning regulations, we have to propose them first, and they go to a public hearing before they're implemented. Yeah, yes. If you have, is it something new?
Yes. It's a different perspective.
If it's just the same old stuff. I mean, but if it's something new, come up and speak to us.
Hi, my name is Pantea Umris, 94 Yetter Road. My husband and I own a local business in town. We also have 2 short-term rentals, one that is next door and across the street from our family farm, which is where our residence is. My husband's family on his mother's side are the Ackleys, the Ackley brothers, the potato farmers. On his father's side, the tree farmers, the Umrises. We have deep, deep roots into this town and embrace that. And I say this because we take a lot of pride in our community, in our town, and where we live. The first home that we purchased, which is a short-term rental, was unoccupied for 17 years. It was infested with mice, with termites, and eyesore in the community. We took that and we, with intention, deliberately hired every single possible vendor from this community to help with us with our blood, sweat, and tears to fix it, repair it, and make it into a home. And we did the same thing for the house across the street. When it comes to the guests that we have in our home, we vet them. We're very strict with the policies that we have for daily noise, quiet hours that we have, the people that we allow, and we personally improve each guest that's there. I think that there's a negative stigma and a generalization that's happening with STRs, that they're just this. But it would be foolish to say that all STRs are not run responsibly, that they're run by people that live in this community and care about it and need that income. And it would be foolish to say that STRs don't help the local economy. We don't just recommend our guests to go to SIFT or Engine Room. We say, go to Sneakers for live music in the spot, go to Chester's. These are all the different places to go. We house families that go to Connecticut College or that serve in the military that are here. And we provide a void, which with the housing and hotels that are not there. So I speak in support of STRs that are run responsibly and for areas that care. We even have our neighbors. We have every single one of their cell phones in the surrounding. We've had neighbors approach us and that are helping us with them, from cleaning to management of it. So we look at it from a holistic perspective. So thank you for your time.
I want to thank everybody for their time. I apologize for my sunburn, my appearance, and most likely my smell. I was planting Christmas trees today, which we have been, as my wife just came up here and said. Deep roots take a lot of pride in the community. I think there's a couple things that stood out to me tonight was somebody had mentioned that, the STRs are nothing but a commercial business, and I think that's ludicrous. we take a lot of pride in our properties. I think the most important is that it doesn't matter if it's a long-term or short-term, if you live in the house, if you don't live in the house, what it really comes down to is you care about your neighbors, you care about your property, and you care about who stays there. And again, as my wife said, we vet them, we make sure we have everybody's number in the neighborhood. Just for an example, just last weekend, we had a couple come into our house, seemed very respectful. And I think a lot of people, on a side note, that aren't familiar with these STRs, there's a lot of information that you can pull and find out before you accept if they come in. So it's very important to know who's coming to your property. That's a huge issue as well. You have to know who's coming. So for example, continuing my point, somebody that stayed last weekend, they seemed very respectful. You know, we have a camera in the front yard, they showed up, it seemed to be a bunch of young kids, which we weren't expecting. I preemptively called our neighbors and said, hey, our rules are very strict, it's not a party house. And I just want to let you know, if the noise gets a little bit too loud, just call me, let me know. So just to wrap it up, not to be repetitive, it comes down to caring about your properties, caring about your neighbors, it's very important. And just making sure that the right people stay there. Thank you. Did you say your name? I didn't get it. Oh, sorry, Tom Mummers. Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
All right, we can proceed back to our agenda. Next item, we have all business discussing our zoning regulation amendment. Potential moratorium X amendment.
So in your packet, there's in your packet, there is a draft of a text amendment for a moratorium on data centers. You can see there's a definition of data centers. There is an addition to the definition for telecommunication facility that says telecommunication facilities are not data centers. And then there's the language of the moratorium. The moratorium would be, what I'm suggesting here is for 9 months in order to allow you time to draft appropriate regulations, during which time you would not accept any kind of land use application for data. The definition here came from the state language. I'd be really interested to hear what Kevin has to say about the definition, given your experience with data centers.
Shouldn't it address processing data too?
Maybe.
No, I just,
I took it from the.
no,
state
I
definition.
understand that. Because I think that's, I was reading somewhere several weeks ago about processing data creates a need for these large centers. Maybe Kevin will know about that.
Deb, I don't have that in front of me. I'm sorry. I thought I had read all the documents. And is it long that you can read it in this forum?
Ready?
Yep.
A facility that is developed, acquired, constructed, rehabilitated, renovated, repaired, or operated to house a group of networked computer servers in one physical location or multiple contiguous locations to centralize the storage, management, and dissemination of data and information pertaining to a particular business or classification or body of knowledge.
That's it. So, the one thing I think that it doesn't talk about is scale. So for instance, a data center that's associated with Pfizer within a building, is within that building. So that applies. A small greenfield data center that may be a tier 1, which is equivalent to a telecommunication center as far as size is concerned, and may only be for one organization. That's a data center, and would seem to qualify for or very similar to what we have now. But anything beyond that, so we almost have to put something in there as far as scale. Anything that is a tier 2, 3, 4, tier 4, G5 type of operation. We just have to put something in the document that talks about scale. So for instance, if I know Electric Boat runs out of a Norwich data center, or Pfizer wanted to expand their in-house data center, those of course are legal, right? But anything, as I said, from a scale standpoint, it's kind of like saying a chicken coop, because it has chickens and eggs, is the same as the world's largest restaurant. If a chicken coop was allowed in a district, but that restaurant, just because it sells chicken and eggs, should not be. The scale is just so different. So I'm not sure exactly how to word that, but the scale is very clear for hyperscaler data centers, for anything above, a attached data center to a physical headquarters location like a Pfizer or General Dynamics. Just doesn't seem, that's what I think we need to have the moratorium on.
Well, there's some place that the definition of a tier one is easy
Yeah.
to.
Well, why, but shouldn't we we're just putting a moratorium on it. I think it should be blanket. And then
Okay.
we should have time to decide. what
Define
is
it. Sure.
Right.
That seems appropriate, Chair.
I think that's all we want.
That's okay.
It's only a short period of time.
Well,
It is.
Testing is 9 months from the day of the effective
Right.
date.
Right.
And the regulations at that point would take into account
And
different
then
scales
we
and the
would
regulations that are
determine,
appropriate for
right.
those.
Right. And then we could decide those tiers or size or scale or processing, et cetera, along those type of lines.
Right.
So I find that appropriate, Deb.
Okay, thank you.
If there could be a data center in the back room here that we wouldn't care about, we don't want to.
Well,
Sure.
it's all, no application, existing ones. it's
That's
not
right.
a problem.
Would someone come to us for a data center that they were gonna put in the back room?
No,
No,
because it's just an
It's not
ancillary use
site, it's
within
not
the.
land use,
That's right.
Right, they would pull a building permit, that's what they would.
right?
Right.
So I don't think that I don't think there's any risk to us stopping someone from putting a server in the back room. Go on.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah,
Well,
no, I know you want to conduct
well,
this in an orderly way.
no, yes, I
I'm used to these,
Everybody has a chance.
the Zoom.
I usually just go down the list.
Yeah, no,
You're-
no, that's fine.
You're the first person on the list, so.
So I guess, because the zoning official determined that this looked most like a telecommunication facility, are we redefining what a telecommunication facility is in some way?
We are for the purposes of this moratorium, such that we don't prohibit telecommunication
So we're making a
facilities.
distinction between these two things.
Right, so for this moratorium, we didn't want to put a moratorium on telecommunication facilities, all telecommunication facilities. So by adding that term at the end of the definition, we're strictly talking about data centers and moratorium on data centers. And not something that might be an accessory to a tower, for example.
Okay. And then, okay, so that's pretty clear to me, I think. And then the other thing I was wondering about is that when we did cannabis, I don't believe we had a time limit to it or define it in any way. And I know that the attorney last time said that the state likes to keep it within a year. So I hope it doesn't take a year, but I would prefer to allow us as much time as we need. And then if we can do it in 9 months, great. We don't have to have a continuation. I don't think it just gives us that much more comfort. So I would prefer to take at this point as much time as we can, and then, work as diligently as we can.
Al, did you have any concerns with the proposal?
I have no concerns with this because, as we said, it's just moratorium on new separate buildings. I kind of concur that we should be able to knock this out fairly simply in a few months, but why not allow us the year because stuff happened?
Barbara, do you have any?
Yes, I think I'd prefer for it to stay at 9 months because things like this tend to expand to the time allowed. And with all due respect to staff, if you're given a year, you'll take a year. So I just assume see it at 9 months.
Because we have gotten in trouble because of that. So do you?
Yes, a couple things. For me, I would prefer a 1-year period. And I'll go in just a second, some of the reasons for that. I guess one thing under 11.1-3, the term, it says a moratorium is effective as of, and the effective date would be after the public hearing after it's, so that's approximately 2 months from now or so.
So you would set, if you adopted this get it into the regulations.
Like most regulations, we have the extra month. So it might even be 3 months from now.
So it could be a little bit quicker than that, but yeah, to put the application in, schedule the public hearing, do the referrals, have the hearing, make a decision, choose an effective date.
Okay, then what happens if an application comes in and says, oh, look, I have a telecommunication facility here. I want to put this in this light industrial. And the moratorium isn't in effect yet because we're still in the public hearing phase or something else like that.
So a telecommunication facility would be still allowed.
Right. See, and that's why I guess what concerns me about that, and this is why I think, as I've said before, and others too, that the zoning enforcement officer should really vacate what he has said, because otherwise that is still controlling the process rather than the commission and the public and staff controlling the process. You know, how we're going to go forward. If we all agree that this is the way to go, why do we have this thing hanging on our heads where someone still controls because that person wrote one memo unbeknownst to us for a year? And, you know, why should, and all of a sudden somebody comes in with, oh, look, I have 2 applications here. I got one for 117. Don't you like this? And I got one over here for Hazelnut.
So I have a couple of things. So again, telecommunication facilities typically are more like accessory things that go with a cell tower. That's more typically what we see. With regards to data centers, there has to be a host agreement per the state statutes. There has to be a host agreement with the town in order to allow data centers to come in and get an application. At this point, the town council has chosen not to do a host agreement with the property on the southern portion. South of 95, excuse me, there is one in effect for north of 95, although I understand that those properties are no longer under contract.
Well, that's a little bit, it's a lot of questions and everything, but what if all things came together and then the application comes in, say for the one on 117?
Well, first you need a wetland permit. That would more than likely be a public hearing. It would take probably 3 to 4 months to process it. So I mean, I think practically speaking, you would not see a site plan application for a data center in the time that it's going to take to do this moratorium.
Okay, I would just feel a lot more comfortable, and I don't understand why the person, given that this is the, if it is the intent of the commission to go forward with a moratorium, why that person would not, in a sense, take back what they have said and determine. I think it'd be the right thing to do. And then you'll let the public have their chance to tell us what they think about our proposal.
I mean, I think there are implications to that. I am.
But that letter only applied to one application, right? So if somebody, a new person, another person came in, it wouldn't apply to it.
Well, I mean, he had determined that data centers are regulated as telecommunications. So that would, it's not specific to a property or an applicant. That's his ruling. And there are, I think there are legal implications and consequences to retracting, you know, an interpretation that I'm not ready to talk about. I think it's something an attorney would need to.
No, I understand.
discuss with you.
I understand that. I think there's a lot of implications. Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, that would be what I think should happen on that. And just one other thing that strikes me about this, going from, say, years ago, we were dealing with the whittles and some of the noise ordinances and how they would affect things there. I think we're in a different era now with noise. I mean, noise is one thing. If you have a data center next to I-95 and you live there and you're used to I-95, maybe a noise ordinance is a little different, you know. Because maybe the data center noise is really terrible. I don't know what it sounds like, unfortunately, so I have no experience in that. Somehow I gotta figure out how to get experience, before we start these hearings, if we do. But I just think, it might be a good idea to have a little more up-to-date noise ordinance that would include, you know, a data center type noise. And what would be an acceptable limit, what would be an acceptable time frame for that?
So there is ordinance. So, there are some regulations, and we need to explore that. We have not done a lot of research on noise.
No, I appreciate that. I just think maybe at this time it'd be good to think about a noise ordinance. Right, we don't have a noise ordinance, but to have one that would fit into the new world.
Yeah.
All we're really talking about is a
I
moratorium.
know, I'm just planning ahead.
Noise is a very complex
Oh,
subject.
it is, but I just think maybe we should be thinking about that.
It
too.
isn't something about just saying X number of dB. It's
No, like it
It's
isn't. in this
a lot
case.
more complex. than
So that's all I had. Thanks, Tim.
that. You know, only concerns I had was put some processing of data in. And I sort of like the 9 months because I agree with Barbara. I think we've seen too many times where we get down to the last minute and we get forced into making a decision with no time available. Because we did have one application that we only had 1 day left. If we didn't approve it, it would have been automatically approved. I don't like getting into those situations. But the next step would be you would put this out.
You
For our
submit an
next-
application. We'll develop the application, get you in here to sign it, and that starts the process.
Oh, all right.
But I do need to know if we're talking about 9 months here.
Well, I would say 1 year. I would prefer that. And I promise I will work as hard as I can.
Right, and I will as well.
1 year.
1 year.
1 year.
1 year. Okay, 1 year. Barbara was still saying 9 months because you sound like you were agreeing with her, so I was getting confused as to which way we're going to. I'm good with either one, so.
I could either, but it's maybe 1 year makes.
Well, I mean, we could
We can
certainly
make it 1
aim
year and
for
it's aim
9
for
months.
9
And
months, yeah.
and then if something goes wrong,
We can aim for 4.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
well, I know this from other things that when something does go wrong, then we're coming back and we're extending.
Well, I don't know if we can extend.
Yeah, I don't know either.
It would be another text amendment.
We'd have to have another text
Yeah,
amendment.
so I would prefer to just.
So-
So we would need to be
There.
aware that we're gonna hit the deadline about 3 months
Right.
before in order to do the process.
Yeah, we'd schedule it. Yeah, why don't we schedule it that way and then go with a year? But everybody live with that.
Otherwise, it's just after the holidays.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
So we're ready to proceed. So all you have to do is, I can just sign this and then it goes. in.
We'll get the application form filled out, and make the changes
Yeah.
to this text, and then give you a call so you can come in and sign the application. So the receipt date will be the next meeting.
Okay. Right. Right, and the next item then is short-term rentals, you have a preliminary discussion.
We have a 5-minute break.
Yes, we may.
Good idea.
So we'll,
Coffee,
we will,
I can't sit that long.
Turn the screen off.
Without your rocking
no,
chair.
he can mute his video. So I'll have a 5-minute recess and then come back at 25. All right, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Our- Okay, so our next item is, can we have quiet in the room, please? Our next item is short-term rentals and preliminary discussion. Deb sent us a letter.
So right, so at the last meeting, you asked for some bullet points of types of things that are regulated either by ordinance or by regulation. And that's what you have in this short memo that was included in your packet. To follow up on some of the comments that you heard earlier tonight, the current zoning official has not made a ruling in writing regarding short-term rental. That's why that was not in the packet.
Did you want to go over these and have any discussion
Absolutely.
on
That's
them?
what you like? Sure. So first up is definition. So that's commonly, the most common one I saw was less than 30 days for a short-term rental. Next is property owner presence. A number of regulations require an owner to be present for the short-term rental. There are also some that limit the number of days that a house could be rented without the owner present. Most common that I saw was 30 days. That they could rent their whole house and not be present. Parking, obviously, a concern. Required most regulations required adequate off-street parking. Some limited outside activities and special events, no weddings, no large celebrations outside. Others set hours for outside activities. The zoning districts where the use can be allowed or regulated. So I heard a bit tonight about short-term rentals being, commercial use in a business being run in a residential district. And I know you all are aware that regulations allow home-based businesses in residential districts. So there are currently businesses of differing intensities that are allowed either by special permit, by administrative site plan, and there's one that's a very minor one that's just allowed as a zoning permit. For example, if you are an editor and you're just using your computer and you don't have anybody coming or going, you don't have to apply to be a home-based business. So that being said, a lot of towns will regulate short-term rentals as some sort of home-based business and set conditions, have an application process, and prohibit certain types of dwelling units that could be used as a short-term rental, such as boats, RVs, tree houses.
What is an ADU?
Sorry, accessory dwelling unit. That's all for tree houses.
They're restaurants.
Right. Regulations, ordinances will also lay out the approval process, whether you need a license, if you need a registration, a zoning permit, a site plan, all types of ways to regulate these. Some other common requirements are signage, whether or not signage is allowed. A short-term rental needs to be clearly accessory to a residential use. I saw that a lot. Some towns try to limit the number of occupants per bedroom. And then, adequate provision for trash storage and disposal. So I know in your discussion last time, you were talking about whether or not this commission would regulate it and how that would impact existing short-term rentals. Zoning regulations are effective from the effective date going forward. It would not impact current short-term rentals. In order to regulate those, that would need to be an ordinance adopted by the council that would regulate both going forward and backward from the date of the effective date.
So an ordinance wouldn't prohibit them, it would just regulate.
It all depends what the ordinance says. Yeah.
So you don't have anything here on safety issues like the fire or sewage. Or, I've seen
I
in
have
some
seen
communities, there are concerns or from a health standpoint in, say, whether you have to have sprinklers in the building.
Right.
Those things could all fall under license. Right? Or in the
No,
licensing
well-
process.
Well, the town that I have in Vermont, they're very concerned with that type of issue. Because
it starts to say, well, we're allowing a little hotel. If it's a hotel, you need to sprinkler.
yeah, they're not
Kind of-
concerned, with having short-term rentals. It's just how to make sure that they meet or from a safety standpoint, health standpoint, they're adequate. So where do you want to go from here? then?
Well, so that's what I'd like to hear from you all. I know that you had.
Should we have a
maybe-
workshop session on?
And do you want to include the council in that? I mean, a workshop session on.
I'd like to.
And I know we have sent a memo to them. They have not responded.
Well,
And of course, they're deep.
it's their
into
busy
budget right
time.
now. So we can certainly do a workshop on regulations, if that's what you'd like to do.
Well, those just intertwined, because at the same time they're thinking about regulation, we be thinking about having it in zoning. So the language is just different. Imagine, but it's.
Maybe
most
we
could
should,
be very similar.
would it make sense for us to come up with the regulations that we think should be there? And then sit down with the council?
Yes, I
think so.
Maybe that might be, because that, we have the time to do it, they don't, because they have so much.
We have an invitation that was sent. We haven't got an RSVP yet.
No.
We're just waiting for it.
That is true.
So we might have something they can digest, might be a good idea.
One other thing I want to note, we are finalizing a contract with Horsley Witten to help us with some of these regulations. As I've noted before, we've got Tabitha on board, but she's still doing the old job that she had in planning and development. So we kind of have her half-time. And I was going to tell you later, but Bruce is leaving. Right, so we're
Wow.
down on staff. I know, first Diane, now Bruce. So at any rate, Horsley, we haven't finalized the contract yet, but Horsley Witten will come on board to help us with data centers, short-term rentals, and cannabis.
Bruce is going to work for Horsley.
He's going back home.
One thing that I think that, and I sent out an email months and months ago, definitions. And I think that's something that we really need to focus on, because what I learned very quickly is that we kind of make these things up. Every town defines a hotel as something different. And so I think that that's absolutely critical. And one thing that I think that we need to do and to make sure that our definition is consistent with other entities. The IRS defines these things and they have regulations about them. In fact, if you rent your short-term rental and it's less than 14 days, you don't even have to report that income. It's free, apparently. Our own housing authority has regulations that how they regulate rental properties, and they define these uses, and they have different dates that if you rent your house out for more than certain days. So I think that we need to look at these other entities so that whatever we do, it's consistent with what other groups are doing, or entities or authorities, or whatever it is, so that we're not redefined. I don't think we have to. Somewhere out there's got to be a definition for this thing that's consistent.
Right, and when we did the whole zoning regulation rewrite project, there are essentially planners manuals out there that list every single kind of definition and different iterations of it. And of course, Lee Witten helped us with that as well. And we went through every single definition.
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, I know when we were doing the Pfizer daycare, I don't know if you remember, and John was here, and people were shooting from the hip trying to decide, how do you define it? And then it was, and it's complicated, but it's not that complicated.
I think the Horsley Witten, they were really good to work with. You have to give them I think they're very professional, of course. They came up with a really good product. Not everybody may agree, but that was quite a big job, and I think big improvement for us.
So when they come on board, maybe we should have a workshop
Absolutely.
on this.
We should be finalizing that probably early next.
Maybe we should also reestablish our committee of the chairpersons that the town council initially started, and they had a representative there that they haven't had To reestablish the communication between land use commissions and the town council, because it seems like we're separate now.
We'll do that.
Because it might solve some of these issues that we've had. Where they get involved before we do, and then it's purely a land use. They get doing it backwards.
Is this just a list of like your research?
That's all it is. It's just a list of common things that you find either in ordinances or in regulations.
For other towns that are regulating?
Or cities and states, right, exactly. So things to consider when we start having a workshop to actually flesh out what the regulations are.
And then what Jeff spoke of, I would, safety issues, whatever it is, especially if it goes beyond, a certain level of, whatever it is that we're talking about.
Well,
If
we should at
it's-
least talk about.
Yeah, no, it should be.
And decide is it important or not. May not want to do anything.
And then enforcement, which is going to be the biggest problem that we're going to have, how it's enforced or how we expect people to actually, we can make these regulations, but we have to get buy-in from everybody. And how we, get everyone to hopefully agree that it's in their best interest.
I throw another one out there just for
Go ahead.
thought into this is that I was looking at downtown Mystic, just with it in mind that towns change. And Mystic has changed and it will continue to change. And right now, the commercial and the next lot over is residential. Well, towns evolve over time. And maybe it's true, the next town says residential, but maybe we want to do some kind of an overlay that just expands out from the commercial where having short-term rental is permissible. I say that just because we have some houses that whoever knew that they were short-term rentals, so as part of a house, and so probably always been something like that. It's particularly appropriate to have something three buildings down from Main Street, be able to rent out in the basement. And this is something that always would encourage. Elsewhere in town, not so much, where we really wanted to be a purely residential neighborhood, but the same way we do buffer zone commercial, or some commercial things are okay to have backing up against residential. Some are not. In this case, short-term rental is a sort of commercial use that in some cases can back up against it, but it just doesn't want to keep going.
Because I feel sorry for the people who bought their homes thinking they were going into a neighborhood and then all of a sudden it's short-term rentals.
Yes, that's exactly what I would address, was that if it's out in the neighborhood, it doesn't apply.
This is downtown Mystic. that they bought
Downtown
into.
Mystic or downtown Groton or someplace else, or out on a farm or someplace else where that'll be fine.
Yeah, it's density. Density of the property makes a big difference.
Density makes a property, and I should say the other part is if it's out in the farm someplace,
You
then
don't
that's
care.
fine too. So we can define both those things. But that's some place where it is okay. So long as it just doesn't keep creeping out to the rest of the neighborhood because we want it to stay a residential neighborhood.
My neighbors are just looking for Earl Street, and the neighbor will say, "Oh, you're so lucky. There's no short-term rentals at all on the street."
Well, that's.
I thought it
a-
was great.
that's
It
a
was like a
zone-
zoning joke.
The zoning districts where use is allowed and they're given silly that comes on the back.
It would seem like those kinds of what you're speaking of could be, and that's where you have to, it's going to depend on each individual operation. You still don't, I mean, if you want to create this thing that is boutique hotels, then that's what you're doing.
Right.
And by another name, it's still a boutique
I
hotel.
kind of agree. It's kind of what it is.
So you just have to decide how that, how that all
In some
plays
cases,
out.
if we already have it, it just hasn't come to surface.
So it's like the spice house.
Well, I'll say that's an anomaly just because that's among all private homes.
No, but I mean, that's what we're really, it's that type of a situation. Where you wanted to have it as a boutique. hotel.
That's true, that wasn't good hotel, but that's, across from the library, big lots, that would be okay. With one on High Meadow Lane.
Well, it's a call, the rules. Okay.
There you go.
All right, does anyone have anything else to say on short-term rentals?
Let's get moving.
Short-term discussion.
This is Kevin. I think, I'm not speaking for Barbara, but I think both of us have said in the past, we would like to get moving forward. And I think this is the reflection point that we are. But what you described maybe earlier is something that I would really prefer as well, where I work in these massive, large frameworks within the US government, and you have people from different groups to ensure that you have the cross thought, you have the good handshake. I'd love to be on more the data center than this, but a working group with the town council, and we have representation across, town staff, zoning official or enforcement official, that we put together this not unto just the planning and zoning, but we also recommend, if we choose to move forward, let's make that decision tonight. But we also recommend that we go and we delve into some sort of working group, because we know that we're going to need the town council to do the enforcement side of whatever this new framework is we decide. Those are my thoughts.
And I think we need a framework. We need a document in front of us that we can decide that most of it is pretty good, and then go and meet with other people.
Yes.
So that they've got something to look at,
Well, I think that's the way to approach
not
it.
just want more than
Oh,
one
no,
page.
we want to do our homework
with-
first.
right,
And then
get
sit
our-
down.
Yeah.
So we have something to talk about rather
Right.
than just
Rather than just
starting off free
brainstorming,
with hundreds of people. when you
right,
don't know.
that doesn't work.
Okay, let's move on to new business. We have new applications, proposed car wash.
Can I just, what is our schedule on this? What do you think we're gonna be?
Well, we're gonna wait to,
So as soon as we get Horsley Witten
Horsley
on board.
So it could be like
we'll
next
coordinate.
meeting?
oh,
I
no,
don't know what their schedule is. We'll have to coordinate
I
their schedule.
would recommend a workshop,
That's probably a better way to do it. So we just.
just that
workshops
one
where-
item, and we can have free discussion.
Yeah,
And are they available?
I don't know. That's
Yeah,
what I'm
okay.
saying. We'll coordinate some times with them.
So we're several weeks away. I would guess. Huh? You want to take your vacation?
No.
You
I
take 2
just,
weeks.
I know that 9 months turns into a year. If you let it. And I'm just doing my diligence
I
here.
think the data center has to take precedence.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's a real problem. Okay, referrals, we have nothing. Knowing zoning regulation amendments, does anyone have any concern with that? With the regulations?
Main thrust of these regulation amendments are they're prohibiting cannabis. They're making some changes to the FEMA portion of their regs in terms of substantial improvements. And then they're fixing a lot of typos.
Yes.
Oh, what was the, what
And
was
they
the
changed
FEMA one
planning
mean?
to-
I didn't understand the FEMA one. I was just curious what they're doing since they have
So-
those
so-
sorts of issues and we
Yeah,
might.
so if you,
Well,
if
that was
you're in
the
the flood
time.
zone and you do a substantial improvement of more than 50% of the value of the house, you gotta bring the whole house up to meet flood standards.
Right.
So what they're doing is saying that, right now, they would look at substantial improvements over 10 years. So you've got one, okay, they're reducing that 10 years down to 2. You can do 50% substantial every 2 years. Okay, and not trigger the raising the whole house and improving the whole
Okay,
house.
interesting. Thank
City,
you.
I think the city does one.
For 1 year?
Wow.
1 year,
Yeah.
and
But it really has,
people do it, you know?
They do, because it really, if it's just 10 years, you're just not gonna do it.
Right.
but there's no real impact to the town for their proposals.
No,
Changes.
there's not. No,
And they
that's
just
right.
recognize planning and zoning are
Right.
combined.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
What is it in the town? What do we do?
I'll be honest, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember how we define it.
No, I mean, what's our time?
I know, I don't remember.
Because one
The
is,
building official.
I
deals
think
with
the
that
thing
all
is
the
that
time.
you really, I mean, with something like that, not that I, what knowing does, but 1 year is people end up making repairs to houses that should be torn down. And then it's all, you know, who you get to make your application, because you can make a value of a house 50% of what.
Hmm.
Anyway,
One
there
year.
you go.
It's 1 year.
1 year.
1 year.
Yep.
All right, thank you for your patience.
Good to know all this. Okay, then we have the affordable housing plan that was sent to us.
Right, and Tabitha worked on that in her former / current role. So she's gonna just quickly go through it with you.
Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen. And I am going to go through this quickly because it is late and I know it's a lot of information. And I hope that you have seen this before and may have copy for yourself. If not, it's available to you. It's a
Well, it was in our
75-page
agenda.
document.
It's in our agenda.
Okay, great.
And I think a couple of you actually attended the public meetings.
So just a little overview, the affordable housing plan was developed utilizing funds from a grant, we have a grant from the state, as well as some funding from the town and substantial time on my behalf to work with RKG, which was our consultant. They were a great consultant, actually out of Massachusetts, but did a wonderful job, I think, on Connecticut ordinances. We had several stakeholder meetings. 2 public working meetings. One was held on April 19th. The second was held on June 16th. So it's been a little bit of time, but these were held over Zoom and recorded. They were made available on Groton Municipal Television and still are, I believe. So in order to approve the plan, the section 8-30J, which is from the state statute, says that we have to have a publicly posted, formally adopted plan. So the adoption is through referral of town council at our town. Depends on which town, city you're in, but in our town is council. So we will be having a final public hearing on May 3rd with final comments on what's about
And this is a Groton plan, is it for the entire town?
the entire town.
Some of the actions don't address the other zoning districts in the town.
We tried to incorporate them. We tried to reach out and hear
reference-
comments. So if we didn't hear any comments, it
No, the
was.
reference says the Groton town zoning should be changed. It should apply to all districts in the town. Because it's not very obvious, but in some of these cases, the city would have their own. Or
Right.
no, I mean, their own plan.
Oh, so this,
Oh, you'll-
this encompasses the city?
It does.
Okay.
Encompasses everything within the town.
Right.
That's just
Right, so
fine.
the state
Just so it's
recognizes
clear.
us as the municipality, the town of Groton.
Yeah.
So because we're the municipality, we have to.
But
carry
for
the affordable
cannabis,
housing.
see, municipalities are defined differently by zoning district.
Right, probably, yeah.
They are.
So, like I said, it's 75 pages. I'm just gonna hit some highlights. There's some charts and graphs in here, a lot of charts and graphs, so. 4 considerations here were of growth. We are expected to grow our population, although population change has been fairly flat. Because of so many jobs coming through the subbase, Pfizer, we really are seeing that we're poised for growth. Affordability, that's housing prices and sales and rents are outpacing what most Groton residents can afford. So households are paying more than they should to live in town, and houses do not find that housing. We're looking to minimize displacement always. Housing prices and incomes are rising, and it puts immense pressure on households. What we want to create is economic diversity, housing diversity, so that we minimize displacement of those households.
And then also leveraging resources, so how we can seek opportunities and challenges with partners, leverage resources for housing. So the first, go ahead.
To go back to the growth, it talks about 5,000 jobs. I assume that's electric boat. But that, if you saw an article in the paper recently, that 5,000 included Quonset Point and Groton. So there weren't 5,000 people in Groton. So it should be verified.
That study was from 2019.
Yeah, some of the numbers
Yeah,
were,
so it's a little bit out of date. I mean, it's funny, it's like the economy wasn't so good then.
yeah, there was
House
one
prices
chart,
were
and then
flat,
we'll see it when we see it.
and now house prices are crazy, and it is more difficult,
Oh,
but
yeah.
then the other thing in this too, the short-term rentals play a part in this because the housing stock is down, partly because of that.
And that's not, that should be added.
I think that's an interesting question. And, you know, I looked and there were like 11 big hotels in town. I was like, I wonder what the occupancy is of a hotel. I wonder what the occupancy is in short-term rentals. And what's the, you know, vacancy rates and all that. I think it'd be a really interesting analysis.
Well, we just lost a
Well,
hotel,
we
right?
lost.
Yeah,
one
that's
by,
right. Well,
Groton
you
Motor.
didn't. You got more residential housing, right?
Right.
You know, look at and the schools too, all that housing coming in. I mean, that's been a pretty recent change. It's really interesting. It's
Yeah,
so
and
much.
that one on Long Hill Road is another. And
Yeah,
another
that's
small
right.
apartment complex.
The one
Yeah.
that we just approved.
Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
Seems like you guys wanted to skip to the comments.
No,
No, I don't need to go through all this. I can.
Hey,
we
you
can
read
skip
our
to the
minds,
pages you
right.
wanna talk about. We can do that,
No, that would be perfect.
yeah? So, all right, well, let's just skip through the pages quickly and then we can stop. This was a whole bunch of information. I won't repeat
Oh,
that.
yeah, that lower one there, sorry, there's my only comment, I'm like talking all night, but the lower right one there, when they talk about reinvestment in the Paquonic Bridge area, I was curious about really what that would mean, because I remember one time we were considering the zoning for that area, and we're kind of like, what can we do to encourage redevelopment and in something that would, you know, fit with the area, I think, and make more housing, better housing available, because we're dealing with temporary structures from World War II there. And the idea that you're gonna pump more money into that is, you know, maybe you could do something to encourage people to invest, you know,
Well,
multifamily houses or whatever, makes sense.
Temporary housing on a floodplain.
Yeah, it's like it's a floodplain.
Where I sort of like get lost is, and that neighborhood in particular, right? So South Paquonic Bridge, Midway Oval, that area. So I get it, you know, but we're talking about two different things. One is quality of housing, the other is affordability. And whether we like it or not, the quality of housing is what makes it more affordable, because it's a lesser quality, and so that makes it more affordable. So then you get this, you know, and we see it everywhere, gentrification, right? So then when you start to invest in that housing stock and then it becomes more valuable, then it becomes less affordable. How do you do that?
Oh.
You know what I mean, right?
I do totally agree. I also think that affordable housing can have quality to it. You don't want the housing to be run down.
No, I'm not advocating that. No,
Oh.
not at all. No, I just understand also is that, you know, so what makes housing more affordable? And from a builder's point of view, it's usually square footage, right? So you need smaller spaces, smaller building lots. And that goes into zoning and how you encourage people to build. You know, they did it after World War II. Or multiple, in fact, around here, developments that went up with 6 and I spoke about them at last time. These capes and ranches, 600 and 700 square foot, single family homes. And they were affordable to vets coming home from work, but so we've gone away from that.
You're describing them as middle housing. which we talk about in this plan, is that we have a need for missing middle housing.
Yeah.
Which is that housing that's kind of for
Yeah.
working professionals. Maybe the finishes are a little less fancy,
Well,
but still.
those
is a
houses were,
nice
you know,
house.
they always hardwood floors that throughout, you know, it wasn't, they didn't build them cheaply, but they built them well. But I'm just like, you know, thinking out loud, I don't know what, you know, but there's other ways. I know too, is that you can't get there aren't very many builders who will do that kind of work because, you know, a lot of times it's our zoning regulations that prohibit. You know, you want a 3-acre lot, and a lot of times those things, that rule used to be for septic systems, but it's not anymore. Now it's to, you know, it's kind of an exclusionary sort of way that you can keep people out.
But if you have urban sprawl, I think that adds to the cost. You really need to have a densely populated area. In the urban sprawl, it's what you're talking about, and you don't want to do.
No,
that.
no, oh, no, I don't know but like where we have our, you know, our cluster type of development or something like that. I don't know.
That's what you want.
Fourplexes, sixplex, and eightplex.
Yeah.
That way you can get them up along public
But-
transportation line,
But it's,
or somewhere near a grocery store, which is a real problem in this town.
well, that's what one of the problems are. I think you have to have the housing on it. The densely populated and public transportation, so you can afford maybe to own or have a house or housing. Because you don't have to have 2 cars and a family.
Well, that's it
Is
too.
that
and
something that I forget, I didn't see it anywhere in this report, as I recall, or in any of the discussions, and something that I kind of started harping on was one thing that's always becomes a problem with people of limited means is getting groceries at a reasonable price, rather than going to the convenience store or some of the
Yeah.
outrageously thing.
food
And right,
deserts.
and right, they're terrible food deserts. And right now, we actually kind of have that. tremendously. Most of our low-cost housing in Groton is nowhere near a decent grocery store. We've got a nice array of grocery stores, and they're not walking distance.
Anyway.
Well, they are to some, but to very few.
Well, you used to be able, you lived in Mystic, you go walk down to the
TAP,
You
absolutely.
can't do that.
No, or there was an,
But anything on
Fort Hill had,
Well, yeah,
my
Fort
wife
Hill
calls it
had
an IGA. The IGA, you know, I mean, it's gone now, but I mean, there used to be grocery stores that were, you know, A and P started out as that. They were small
Yeah.
grocery stores.
Yeah, because you just have
There is-
the
there's
First
still one-
National down there. and-
Yeah.
Because we do still have one housing authority development that's actually walking distance to Big Y and to Aldi's. We got one. And there's some apartments, some other housing around there. And everything else is way far away, and the concentration should be the opposite, should be all near
Well,
these.
we changed the zoning from multi-use in those shopping centers. That's one of the things that you would get out of that, and they're not even discussed in it.
Well, I don't know if those would end up being affordable necessarily.
Well, they might be.
They could be,
could be.
but I don't think. that-
Well, it makes
Well,
it
I don't
more
think
of,
we're talking about just, excuse me, just to affordable. And we're also talking market rate,
Well,
because
yeah,
as the study
right.
says,
But-
people that are using those units that could afford better. So if we build the better, then we can empty out some of those.
I-
It might, yeah, it might free
We
up.
say
other
affordable,
funds.
it's a classic terminology, and what we're thinking of is just making it not so
No, but one
expensive.
of the things they're talking about, a lot of, say, single people have moved into, or will be moving into town that have. And those might be an ideal location for.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
We're seeing smaller households.
But that's not even discussed in this. To me, that's something the town should,
Locating near grocery store.
no. No, trying to get the town center used, developed.
This is the affordable housing.
No, but that was what the development was. Add housing units on top of the existing buildings.
Which could be affordable,
Which-
or at least market rate, but middle housing, it'd be
Right.
okay housing,
the mixed use.
mixed use,
Sure.
not big, they'd be small, because it's.
No, and
it's
I really,
convenience
I'm
on it.
glad to see the accessory, those are the kinds of
And the
things that
ADUs, yeah.
accessory or 2-family homes. If you're on sewer, I don't see why that is to me. I mean, that is the most affordable house that a person can own.
Was there anything in here on, energy, improving the, energy efficiency of some of the homes and stuff like that? I don't think I saw it.
I think there was a reference to it, but it probably could be stronger,
Yeah,
and
but-
I understand your point.
Yeah, no, thanks. Then I guess, the other thing is, I don't know if there's any government programs to subsidize some of this too. I'm totally not up with that.
Yeah.
But there might be, especially if you're doing a mix of things. Maybe that makes sense in this too. I really don't know what the economics are and what it would look like.
Some of the graphs were sort of dated.
Yeah,
And
right.
I think that they either should be, I don't know where you even get a lot of this information. It must be impossible to try to find it all.
Well, 5 years will be more.
Yeah, but
They'll catch this boom time.
it threw me.
Yeah.
Well, it was talking about, yeah, and it's like,
Right.
housing costs are stagnant and the value of homes, and I was like, that kind of, then I get this in my head, I'm reading this document, and I'm thinking, oh, this is,
I think it's
Old.
unfortunately, I've been a victim of the times.
it should almost be, I would say, almost delete it if it can't be updated, because it sort of set me off in another direction.
Well, it's really should be addressing, I think, what do we do from here?
Hmm.
Not the values are. important. The actions.
And there are a number of goals and potential strategies in here. So the first one being zoning, think about what we could do to our zoning.
Yeah, but that, I think we should ignore that,
Okay.
because it's something everybody says is the problem cause. I think there's a lot more. Boy, I mean, some of the zoning could be there, but we have a lot in there. We have ADUs that are in there. Right? We have cottage developments are in there.
I think some of this
And I
stuff is
thought we discussed that.
recent.
thing
It
about-
hasn't really had the ability to have the desired effect yet.
Well,
Some
no,
of the things we do, I think, or that we have done are very positive.
Yeah,
But some of the things you were just talking about, Michael, I think we might want to think about, allowing duplexes if you are on municipal water and sewer, in the zones that have that. Because there are.
Well, I mean, that's,
Strictly
I-
single family.
but also where we can have public transportation. I think that's very important. To keep the costs down. So people can.
yeah, no,
use
that-
it
those
like
kinds of things,
how
the
they
public
need it in the electric
transportation
bus.
and how about, those, anything that can make a house that needs 2 cars need 1.
Yeah,
Right. That saves somebody $500 a month or more.
What is there in public transportation?
Everybody realize.
Public transportation, but also, I remember,
No, the bus is terrible. I was so happy. I was probably end up fighting by a
Well,
car.
we'll
I was
build
thinking,
put a trolleys back.
"Oh, really?" I mean, if you have to use a bus, oh my gosh. I mean, it's a good thing to use a
Technology's
bus.
coming to the assist. We just have to hang on to it. That's gonna be a game changer, just because we're gonna have electric
Well,
self-driving.
yes, if we could get
I
electric.
want you to have
in-
electric self-driving jitneys
Oh,
that
so
are
that would be
operating with,
wonderful.
that you're operating from your app. That's like taking an elevator.
No,
That's
seriously.
a big game changer.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And everybody should have access to it, like a Uber for everybody.
we have a continuous parking problem in downtown Mystic. And I would think that if, like what you were saying about if somebody, I think that we can do it with our parking regs. If somebody has if someone wants to put a grocery store in downtown Mystic, or even to just sell basic things, you might think about giving them a parking bonus for something like that.
Yes.
Well, but I mean, if someone's gonna sell milk and bread and whatever necessities, so that a person can then not have to get in their car and drive.
Or maybe you give them tax break
But it's not just,
or something.
parking is something that we can,
No.
because a lot of times we're giving them away anyway.
was gonna say.
Everybody makes it.
Giving away more than what-
Or, I'll go with the bicycles too,
We'll get a free pass.
If,
Regardless.
there you go. There you go.
So some of the other zoning changes that were put in here that were possible were things like adding units at existing mobile home parks if land is available,
Oh, I hate that.
Allowing
Why
new
don't we
mobile
allow,
parks.
I don't think mobile homes should be allowed in an area subject to hurricanes. They're not
Yeah.
safe.
You don't say,
Hmm?
that's true, that's
I
so
don't,
true.
I mean, why not?
Unsafe and inefficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Why
understand
not
how they
take the
happen.
40-foot,
Cheap, but
40-foot shipping containers and modify them? No, I'm
That
serious.
works.
That's what we should be doing. Why are you laughing?
Because I know, because they work.
No, but they're sturdy.
Yes, they are.
Hmm?
Well, you know, you can engineer a mobile home to be anchored. That's what they do.
you can't.
They
Yeah,
anchor
but
them down.
it's very fragile. Hmm?
The home itself isn't fragile.
They're having a
It's
giant
foundation.
debate in Waterford right
For a
now.
long time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So-
The home itself is sturdy because it's basically be on wheels, so they're actually remarkably sturdy.
That's
It's the
not the-
foundation that's the problem.
the problem.
To hold it down, not hold it up.
But they are affordable.
They are for them.
That's because they're modular.
Yeah.
So you
That's
build
what we really
modular
want
homes
is
very
modular
affordably.
homes.
So let's just do that. And stack them up, be on top of each other.
That's what you want is modular.
Could you go back? What was that? Did you finish that page?
I haven't finished anything.
You're not. Because I wanted to see what you were talking with the zoning here, because I did read this.
Sure.
It's because that's a fad. You always pick on someone.
So new mobile home parks are not currently allowed in Groton.
Right.
But so we got a letter from the zoning official talking about Drosdick Drive.
What is that?
At the end of our package.
Yep.
Multi-unit. What was it called?
Multi-unit dwellings in the
Multi-unit
MTC.
dwellings.
grid
And I was
district.
like wrestling in my mind, trying to imagine, because he said, well, anyway, why wouldn't a mobile home be allowed as a multi-unit dwelling?
No, that's not what this was,
No, I know, but why do we not allow them?
because it expressly says that mobile home developments are not allowed. in regulations. Yeah, they're
That's a
not.
home.
I know. That's right.
Oh,
So
well,
why?
No, I'm not advocating for them against them, but when I saw this, I thought the way that this letter defines them and the way they were defined, that you could make that into a mobile home park.
No, get an interpretation of that.
There's one right down the street from us. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, wait, we should finish up the.
Sure, the mobile homes, there was a time in history when mobile homes, you buy one and then you ship it or you travel with it. And the Navy, in fact, had one circle that was for mobile homes, and that was because these Navy guys would bring a mobile home with them, needed a place to put it. Almost nobody does that now. The mobile home comes and it sits. Well, then it should just be a prefab home. It should be a modular home, because now we're not doing mobile homes. These are leftovers from the 60s, the 50s.
Well, they're probably too big.
And that's
Yeah,
what,
they are.
that's what a lot of them are. You're right. The newer ones, the nicer mobile home parks that we have in town are just that. They're double wide.
Double wide, 12 foot,
standard
and you just put them on a
trailer,
foundation,
yes.
and those are fine. Zoning, I don't know why it would bother with it. Local places might not like the looks of them because they're a little less substantial looking, but a neighborhood full of those would be perfectly charming. Just don't want a car house. You need to clump them together.
Well,
I think those are manufactured homes, not modular.
That's correct. That's right. Actually, there's a soft line between those two things.
Right.
Oh, yeah, because you're saying new mobile home parks, so you mean manufactured homes.
Exactly. And I think to your point, regulating them as though they are multifamily, multi-unit. I don't think the standards that we have in here for multi-unit or multifamily really apply to individual. I think we'd want different standards, I guess is my point. Because the multifamily section, talks about, laundries being available for a certain number of units when it's just, I think we would want standards that are specifically for a multi-unit development that are essentially single family homes on one lot.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We go back to.
How about the next
Yeah,
one?
I think that they could work if you regulated them, because I think the problem that I see with them is that when they, there's 5 feet between each one,
Right.
and they don't have ability to have a garden
Right.
or
You want
anything else,
standards,
you know?
Yep, exactly.
Let's go to the next.
Please.
This was another strategy, was to leverage public land for housing production, so
That's what we're doing.
we're kind of already doing that,
Yeah.
yeah, so I
All
think
over the
we're gonna skip that one.
We were supposed to be a full build out, remember that?
This one was to talk about having a employer assisted housing program, so that's something that economic development is in conversations with businesses about.
Good luck.
I don't think you'll get that.
This just talks about housing as a marketing tool, how people really, when they're thinking about what community they want to live in, they think about the housing stock and the quality. So then goal 2 is, again, more zoning, missing middle zoning, accessory dwelling units, which we're already doing, as you mentioned, and then housing options for seniors, having more missing middle housing options like we talked about, that are smaller in scale, more affordable, 3 to 4 unit buildings, 3 to 10 unit buildings. It also throws out the idea of using a density bonus as an incentive. How do you feel about that?
I understand the, the senior one, if it was supposed to be like, was it 15 years ago or more, when we had all these big proposed projects for active seniors and stuff. That's not what you're talking about, right?
No,
I wasn't
just
sure
talking
what it
about
meant.
today's seniors. I actually work with a group of seniors, Mary Jo Riley at the Senior Center, we call it Age Friendly Groton. And they talk a lot about how they would love to see more housing that is single story, easy to get in and out of, lower cost, smaller, because we're downsizing. So
We had those pods, didn't we, at one point, granny pods, what were we thinking about?
those are ADUs.
Yeah, right,
ADUs.
but a nicer one that would,
Well, we
Be
did
built.
have one development that never happened.
right, something, yeah, right, and,
That they were gonna wipe out the salamanders.
that's right. And then there was the big age in place, it was much more, a lot more people, a lot more seniors like that idea. Too, so I don't know, that's changed a lot. I mean, the people want that, I think, they don't want to leave their home.
Well, the age in place thing seems to be doing fine, if I look at these places. The only problem I have with them, they tend to be out in Yakaput.
Yeah.
They're never part of the community. They're always, it's so rich, it's beautiful, and you walk to nothing.
But you have a self-driving car soon.
Well, that will change it, that's true, but it'd be nice to be able to just walk into town.
Yes.
Yeah.
Goal 3 talks about housing rehab, which we currently have a program, but then we could expand that program if we were to find some additional funding for that. Mobile home protections and improvements, so funding for there. So the current housing rehab program out of community development does fund rehab projects for mobile homes. It's just not really widely known. So we talked about making that more accessible to folks, and then providing rental assistance programs in Groton, which we do as well.
These programs, they have to be owner occupied?
Yes. Actually doing 2 projects. And then the last goals are about inclusionary zoning, which I know is a little bit more of a reach. Establishing a housing trust fund, which would be, again, based on funding, developing that pot of money that we could create, grants that would help with affordability, and then partnering with affordable housing organizations, which we do.
Who does the HUD, like when you have deed restriction?
What do you mean?
So there's properties in Groton that have deed restrictions on them, that they have to be sold at certain amounts or.
Yeah, so they have to put a deed restriction on it, that it's affordable, and then that gets onto the list. That is
And then
reported to
who-
the state.
Who does that? Is that HUD? Or
The
is it
Department of Housing is who we work with
the state?
for all state housing.
And does that work? I mean, it seems like it works.
Well,
I don't know how
we've
many
reached,
there are.
so the threshold that we are required to meet, we've reached that. The
Okay.
percentage of affordable housing that we're required to have in the town. But this is kind of, this affordable housing plan is thinking further than that, that we're not just trying to reach the small threshold we want to go. But inclusionary zoning is something that we would take a percentage of whatever housing development would be, that would be permitted, and we require that they have so many deeds.
I think those are the things that are most effective for, or at least in a lot of ways, is that when people who might not normally be able to live, when we're all living together, you know what I mean? That you have a neighborhood where there's different level income, like you may have, you know, a doctor living next to, you know, someone who's working at Electric Boat, and it's because one property is able to build in a different way, or they have a deed restriction and the other one, and I think those are good things, but I don't know how you.
And it's beneficial to mix incomes in a
Yeah.
project.
So maybe even like not one size fits all zoning regulations.
Well, a lot of neighborhoods are like that already.
Where
They
you
may
may
be one
allow-
zone, but they're all different income levels and houses and stuff
Yeah,
like
but
that.
how do you like, through your zoning regulations, how do you
It doesn't-
allow someone to make a development that has McMansions and other things also that might, do you do
With
that?
inclusionary zoning.
Yeah.
That's what we.
But it just happens
Fire.
too. I mean, there's places in town where you have very much, middle class, modest homes and stuff like that, which are fine, but people often have bought a lot and they construct what they can afford. And people can afford different things, or maybe somebody has a water view or something like that, or it's up a McMansion. Or whatever. But you have that mix, and I think and then you have a lot of more diversity sometimes in those neighborhoods. But that's a starting from scratch thing, with relatively smaller lots and things. But I like it, actually. I think it's nice. Rather than.
Yeah. Where I see inclusionary zoning a lot is in DC, but it's typically in apartment buildings where it's almost like a set aside in some ways. And the only way you can rent that is with a particular, income level. But I don't see it in any, broad communities at least. But in DC, you see a lot of that in the bigger buildings.
Yeah, New York,
Same
same
very
deal.
quietly, a couple of large apartment buildings in Norwich, they're very nice apartments. And a dozen apartments within it are way below, are incredibly cheap.
Yep.
Well, they have affordable housing.
With
The
it,
state allows that, right? Or can't you get special or waiver? Yeah.
You get a
Yep.
voucher. But I
No,
think
no,
what you're talking about is-
you can override the zoning regulations.
Oh.
You haven't met the goal, that's right.
Yeah, Groton has- that's why Waterford is having a big problem right
East
now.
Lyme has had a big flap for years with that.
Someone wants to put in a trailer park on Clark Lane in Waterford, and that's creating a big rift, but they don't meet that threshold, so.
There's a lot of tax credits and money available for folks that want to put affordable housing in their projects too.
Mhm.
So project like you described, they probably, to make it pencil, they get these low income housing tax credits. They put all this money together and.
They haven't done that, have they, in our big projects we've had come in, the big apartment ones?
Because they don't have to.
Because they don't have
It's
to.
because we made the regulate
This would
rules.
require that.
Right.
That's fine. Saved by Paquonic Bridge
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
in the World War II housing.
World War II.
No, I think the thing to me is that you don't want to create and I'll use it, Fisher's Island as an example, where there is no inclusion. Well, there is actually, but it's, almost at one end of the island is purposely excludes, you just can't do it. So actually out there, on Fisher's Island, they have, I think it's called, what's it, you know what it is? Winthrop.
I wasn't invited out there.
No, there's a area in that Fisher's Island that is for the workers.
Oh.
But they're able to own their house, but actually it's the school district owns the land. And so that you are essentially renting the land from the community, and then they are able to control the cost of, you might want to look at it. It's like a mobile home park, but with houses, and a lot of them are really nice houses. It's called something Park. It's like Winthrop. It's got a name, and it's near the school. What it does is it allows the teachers and the fire people and the police, and they only have one cop, but
They have really town-owned land.
it's town-owned, it's owned by the school
Public
district,
land,
but
public
then the
land.
houses, you can
That's
build
leased.
a house on the land that's leased, and they lease it, it's a nominal amount of money, but it's, otherwise they wouldn't have, you would just be,
Maybe that's what they should do with the school property. But in England, they do a lot of that.
I think,
Land
the
is
other
all-
thing, like I know in some places in Hawaii, you're limited to 100 years. But you can only own a property
Oh.
for 100 years or something like that. They have that kind of a,
It's called Walsh Park out there in Fisher's Island, and there's 27 of those units that I know of. But they're, as you described, Michael.
Yeah, they're beautiful, they would beautiful homes, but
Yeah.
Contractors out there and the teachers.
Yeah, but like their median household income, I just looked it up, is between 150 to 151,000 plus or minus 13,000. It's a pretty high income.
Well, it's just an idea.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea. I like that idea.
Across the island. What's that place?
And then the fifth housing goal, we have 5. First time home buyer program, housing, education and resources, and the senior tax relief or work off program. That sounds scary, but I worked in the community and have had that. It's a great program where seniors to work off their taxes could come in and work for the town. So there's some other additional programs you could put together.
Doesn't the town at one time had some deferred taxes for seniors?
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's what some towns
I don't
tax
know
their
if they
seniors at a
still
much
do that.
lower rate too.
But they had to
Long
pay,
Island,
it
something.
had to be paid eventually. Maybe,
Yeah,
because
somebody-
I know somebody in Norway that had,
think there were liens on the property.
were they
Yeah.
liens, Barbara?
I think.
But I know that somebody in Norway, they used to work with it, EB, was in that situation where all family house right on the water. Couldn't afford to pay the taxes, defer, they got deferred. I think that's how they did that.
I think,
I don't remember.
so they couldn't sell the house without the taxes being paid.
But some communities actually give the seniors a break, they give them a lower tax rate.
Mhm.
Interesting thought.
Well, that's it.
Right?
Okay,
Thanks for your
great,
review.
thank you.
Zoom through it for you, but if you have any other comments, please send me an email. We'll make sure to get that.
Super.
So we're doing well on that. Town is well advanced on affordable housing. No, I mean, we've had a lot of.
You've
things
done
in
a
it,
lot of
but
great things. That's for sure.
into our items. All right. Reported chair, the only thing I have is the Regional Planning Commission meeting will be held on April 25th. The only major item on the agenda is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan review discussion. Does anyone on the commission have anything to report?
No, I guess I don't. Yes, light, my favorite subject. We get another update on it because I don't see anything happening. And in fact, a lot of places are getting worse.
Anyone else have anything?
Is this gonna be some, is this like some new method of communicating with us?
So I think at the last meeting that wanted to see his written interpretations.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've set up a system to
Okay.
do that, so he's.
And is this
copying
something that he does? How often does he do
Not
something?
very often, maybe 3 or 4 a year.
And are they always in writing, or does the person have to ask for them to be in writing?
You want it to be.
I mean, this was by a lawyer, right? So they
Yeah,
knew,
you
get
ask
it in
for it in
writing.
writing, because just having him say something isn't worth it. I mean, if you want to, make a decision based on what he's saying, you want it in writing.
I guess when I drove by this and I was sort of a little bit, like, it looks like houses, there's a 2-family, and when he makes a decision like this, he looks at each individual house. They all have to comply with the
So
regulations.
the question that the lawyer asked, there are 4 individual structures on one lot. They want to subdivide it into, single family homes. Single family and duplex homes are not allowed in that zone. It's the downtown zone. It's like the last lot in the downtown zone. So they asked Peter, and Peter said that what you've got essentially right now is a conforming use. You have a multi-unit development that conforms to the zone. If you subdivide it, you need a variance because that's not allowed.
So they could sell this as like condominiums,
That's what I've been telling them. Yes. Yes.
sell them as a condominium.
Good.
Because they look like single-family homes.
I think one of them's a
In fact, one
duplex.
of them is that last one. I kept driving. I'm like, where is this place?
And the owner has been gradually renovated. I mean,
No, they look like they're
way
all,
better
and one of
than
them,
they
that
used to.
196 is for rent. It's got a for rent sign out.
One owner owns all the,
Yeah. Exactly.
on one. plot. Okay, report of staff. Yeah, the zoning official interpretation, then we got.
And then I think we wanted to discuss the Sweeney letter, right? Right, so that's why Bruce is hung on here.
Oh.
Oh.
Here he is.
Still here. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Bruce Lofgren here. Yeah, I did want to discuss the 195 Sandy Hall Road sidewalks. So as you recall, I believe it was a couple months ago, the commission brought up the issue of the sidewalks along Sandy Hall Road and asked staff to reach out to the owner to, kind of initiate discussion on, consideration of sidewalks being installed from Allen Street over across, well, I guess to the end of 195, the property line of 195 Sandy Hall Road. So what I did was I reached out to the owner and she contacted Attorney Sweeney and he provided the correspondence you had in the packets and you probably have in front of you right now. Just a brief history on it for, your recollection. So the first sidewalk agreement was signed in 1999. That was, I believe, when the first approval of Sandy Hall Road, Precious Memories Daycare was first opened. It was again extended in 2005. Then again, in 2019, when I reviewed the plan when they made an expansion to add an additional classroom at Precious Memories. So Attorney Sweeney, wrote that letter. And, basically what he's saying is he's saying that the sidewalk agreement, it's within the Planning and Zoning Commission's ability to require a sidewalk whenever it's determined that additional traffic or additional development in and around the area warrants a sidewalk on Sandy Hall Road. So we just wanted to, bring this up to you and have you look at it and, see what you thought about how you want to address it moving forward. One important thing to consider is that the state has already considered, or they've already approved and will be installing a sidewalk along Sandy Hall Road in the next few years. So it would make sense for the commission to consider, putting this off for a few years to see if sidewalks are indeed installed by the state, and then maybe reconsidering at that time. But it's up to the commission how you'd like to proceed with that. My understanding is that the owner and Attorney Sweeney are willing to come in and speak with you if you'd like in the next couple months, but I really just wanted to leave it up to the commission to see where they wanted to go with it.
There was a drawing that was included that was sort of the proof of what here's the sidewalk that's going to go in. Undated, the labeling's almost nothing. It's not fleshed out. It looks like a sketch. What is that drawing?
Yeah, it was hard to figure out.
I look at it, it looks like sort of a concept that somebody had. There's no traffic lights really indicated, but there are stop lines and everything's spread out to 4 lanes, which I can't imagine a traffic engineer actually did. So I have no idea what I'm looking at here. And it was presented as proof of, look, there's going to be a sidewalk.
There was supposed to be traffic signals.
So, right, so this is one page out of a study that DOT is doing for intersection improvements there.
Okay.
And I think they presented it to the council in July, so we can certainly get you that.
Learn where the state is on this. And one thing, Bruce, is that this was all precipitated by the neighbors, Steenberg. That's why we brought this up. We didn't initiate this on our own. She had complaints. And so I think that if nothing else, we should at least be in communication with her so that we can keep her up to date of what we're doing. And if we do invite Precious Memories, that we at least, let her know that we're going to be doing that, or anyone else.
This plan actually has the sidewalk in front of the, across the street from them too. So is the state going to do that?
Yes, that was part of the project.
I know that Precious Memories, and this goes way, way back when they did this, was it 99? I wasn't here in 99, but it must have been something else, because I know that we traded, they did, and we don't do that very often. They provided sidewalk off-site. I think it was across the street.
They did. because-
So I feel for Precious Memory, they put in sidewalk already that we wouldn't normally, I mean, it's rare that we do that.
Well, they have 2 frontages. They have frontage on Allen Street and on Sandy Hollow Road. And the sidewalk network was developing on the other side of Allen Street.
Right.
So that's why they installed sidewalk over there and then entered into a sidewalk agreement for Sandy Hollow Road. That basically says the commission.
They put it in here.
Yeah.
And then someone else did that other one, right?
It was another
Secretly.
subdivision.
Yeah.
They had frontage
Oh,
on
it was
the other side.
That's right. It was on Pequot.
Right.
Is that new dead end?
And that shows the fire district actually.
And we're
putting theirs
still,
in.
I got it in my book somewhere
Right.
when the 5 years comes up for the Mystic ambulance company. All right. Well, I mean, I certainly would be willing to, have a conversation, but I think it should include Ms. Stein.
We can let her know. I mean, the sidewalk agreement basically says that you can require them to, well, that Precious Memories agrees to put in the sidewalk if it's determined that things have changed, more pedestrian traffic or more vehicular traffic. And in 2019, the last time saw a project out there, we determined that we could continue on with the sidewalk agreement. So it would have to be something that's changed between 2019 and now. I think Mr. Sweeney makes the case that he doesn't think much has changed, plus Dave is going to be installing walks as part of a future project. But as Bruce said, they're willing to come in and talk, and if you guys want, we can get that on an agenda. And then we can talk about it and make a decision what you want to do.
I think we want to know when the state's going to be
Let's see
acting
if we can
first.
find the timing for it.
Yeah,
And what they're actually, there's a study, so how far the study is going. 'Cause
Right.
I'm looking at things here and thinking, I don't know what they're talking about. The 2 lanes is actually handling the traffic right now, and that's showing 4 for a lot of the places. What are they expecting?
So I think it's straightening those.
And this is just one sheet.
I understand it's one sheet, but I understand how these things work very, very well.
Yeah.
And this concerns me, like how many right turn lanes are they proposing for
Yeah,
this?
it
whole
looks
thing?
like they want us.
But the sidewalk
Change
would be,
Allen
I mean, even if we made that demand of Precious Memories today, it would be a year or
That's true.
before it was ever built anyway, so. Gotta wait 2 years maybe, but I'm more than willing to.
I'm having great fears that this is exactly what I was afraid of.
Barbara, you live over in that
Yeah.
neighborhood, and I know that you
There
have.
are people that walk,
Walk,
they walk in the street and it's not safe at all.
Bicycle around there and cannot get across Allen Street. There's no way to do it.
They need this traffic signal, definitely.
That's what this project.
An island would be nice, a few things would be nice, not just have a 2-minute cycle for traffic.
They have to replace that, the sign where, right at the end of Sandy Hollow and Allen Street. It gets knocked over about every other week. I mean,
Does
flat,
it really?
flat. Yes, it should be on spring.
Wow. So you'll get some information from the state.
We'll
Come back with.
schedule them.
All right.
Is this available online sometimes?
It's. Yes, because I gave it to Bill Sweeney, so yes, I have, it,
Okay.
and I will send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Then we have the application update and ASP report. Do you have anything else, Deb? Oh, all right.
Other than just, this is Bruce's last meeting.
Oh,
Yeah, so
congratulations.
Oh, it's your last meeting?
it is. His last day is Thursday.
Oh,
Thanks for stopping by.
We're gonna miss you, Bruce.
so we'll have a pizza party.
Yeah,
It's an early retirement though, Bruce,
yeah, if only I was retiring. No, I took a planning position in the town I live in East Greenwich, Rhode Island. Really enjoyed working in Groton and with the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Planning Commission. Before, I think we were members on both of those, and I wish you all the best with all your work you're doing, and thank you for serving the town.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bruce, for your commitment and passion. Been good to work with, so we appreciate it.
Thanks, Bruce.
Good
Thank
luck
you.
Good luck in
Good
East
luck in
Greenwich. You
doing
can keep them on the straight and narrow. Does anyone have anything else? I entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Is there a second? Moved and second.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you on live next time, Kevin.
I hope. You got to start scheduling around my schedule, you guys. Hey, I'm showing up on Zoom these days. That's a big first step.
Oh, remote.